Hi everyone, my name is Dr. Tim Howe, and I am the Associate Professor of Trombone at the University of Missouri School of Music. Today I'm going to be playing the 2021-2022 Missouri All State Band Audition material. At the end of each excerpt, I'm going to provide some helpful tips for your practice sessions. So etude number 28 is about intonation, it's about slide control, it's about good technique as you're going through. So some things that you can do to help make this better, okay? First, try practicing just sort of what I would call sort of a skeleton of the melody. So it's basically the sort of upper line you see in the excerpt. Something like that. So you're sort of finding your goals in terms of like where you want to go when you go up, okay? The second thing I'm going to recommend is that try to make sure that you're really focusing on your airstream being steady. Think horizontally through this, despite the fact that you're jumping up and down all the time. So I like to think about this as being almost tenuto, so that I make sure that my air is continuing through and that melodic line that I just played really comes through. So what we want to avoid is things like this. Right? We want to be nice and smooth. So you're really letting your air do more of the work, and you don't get quite so tight back in here, and it doesn't become about tonguing or just trying to target the note, right? All right, one last thing, a couple other things I would suggest that you do is try playing it slurred. You could even buzz it or do things like that just to sort of get a really efficient way of moving up and down. We don't want to do a ton of movement here. It really is not needed. I think we see all that jumping around and it makes it a lot tougher. Last thing I would suggest you do, if you have any of the phone apps that have like a drone, you can set the drone on B flat, a couple of octaves of B flat, and play this against it just to help your intonation. Or you could just simply use a tuner. And as always with any of these excerpts, it's a great idea to record yourself and really listen to what you're doing. Is your articulation nice and square? Is it nice and clean? Is it the same all the way through? We don't want things to sort of be mixed up. All right, we want the same articulation all the way through. And the last thing, and I know it's difficult to do, is for every time you try to play this at the tempo, probably 3 or 4 times really slow, right? Just get used to really knowing where you're going in what you're doing. And take the time to do that with this process. Not just one day, but like a whole week or 2 weeks of doing it slow. And so hopefully if you do some of those things, this should come out nice and clean and smooth. So the hard thing about etude number 28, obviously, is the slurs, the quick slurs on the triplets. And we have to if you have trouble doing those kind of fast slurs, you may have to work on some things separately to kind of build them up. It's always a good idea to do slurs in your warm-ups and in your fundamentals time. But something like something as simple as and then the one above it. And do each of these in every position, because for this etude in particular, you have to do some of those slurs out in 6th and 5th position. So get used to feeling what those feel like. And then you can try to work on speeding them up. So you just get facility with that, right? Now, the key to these slurs is not what your lips do. It's making sure that your air is going through. So when I play this, I really try to think about, for every one of these triplets, that I am blowing through with a really positive airstream right from the beginning. I'm not sneaking in with my air. I'm going right from the beginning. Right? So I'm not thinking about all the things I have to do vertically. I'm thinking about really pushing my air through to get that to happen. Some other things that you can do. Obviously, playing this a lot slow is a great idea, just so you find out where things are. I also like to practice these by just going through and doing all the triplets. And I'll go through and just repeat each one 2 or 3 times till I really feel good about it. Notice that this has a lot of alternate positions, and it's really, for the most part, they work better than trying to go back and forth a lot. So for example, the ones in 6th, like the F and A. You know, just trying to, and the ones in 5th position. Do them slowly a lot, get them in tune, you know, really find out where they are and just kind of get really familiar with them. So I know this seems a little daunting in terms of the speed. And so for some of you, you may not be able to get it as fast as I played it, but if you can get it so that it's part of the way there, you will have learned something and your slurs will be better. So that's part of the process of doing the All State stuff, is that you really learn how to play better by doing these kinds of things and having to figure out how to do these things. So take your time on this one. You know, if you have to go into your audition and go, and that's where you are, you will have accomplished a lot from not being able to do it all to just being able to do that. So don't be discouraged by this. Don't be discouraged by the tempo that you hear me play. That's the optimum tempo. I mean, that's the ultimate tempo. But if you have to do something a little slower than that to get it to be accurate, that's fine. I also like to practice this doing it just for my airstream without the upper note of the triplet. You know, so that I just get used to moving my air through. So have fun with this one. Take your time and again, do it a lot slow and work on your flexibilities in addition to actually playing the etude. So the intervals on exercise on page 126 is a lot of up and down, right? And so our temptation is to start doing things like, right? We start trying to think about all the vertical stuff. And just like the other two that we talked about already, this is really actually more about blowing through and creating really efficient movement between them than it is about all the jumping around. So, like the first one we talked about earlier today, I like to practice this a lot with just the upper line. And you notice I'm playing it pretty sustained. You know, I'm not slurring it, but I'm not letting there be a lot of gaps in between. I want to make sure my air is there, ready to go to the next place. So then I'll go through and I'll try slurring it. If I can do that, jumping between them, tonguing them is easy, right? So we want to find that. And then going through and doing it fairly deliberately, you know, don't get in a hurry to go fast. You know, and really think about your air going through from one note to the next. This is also an excellent exercise for intonation. So again, for each of these three little excerpts, you know, put the bass note of every key. So the first one, play a B flat while you play through the excerpt. Then put a D on and play the two sharps one. And then play for your four flats, A flat major, put A flat down so that you can just continue to play in tune. If you want to just use a pure tuner and just wash to make sure that you're in the ballpark for everything, that's great too. So number 142 obviously is about your ability to double tongue and to multiple tongue. So if you don't know how to do that yet, here's a quick little lesson on double tonguing. We're just going to say the syllables tu ku, 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 tu and ku. So the hardest thing is to get used to spitting out that K. So for a moment here, if you're with me, just say those syllables, tu and ku, tu, ku. Feel how your tongue arches up for the K, tu, ku. So you really get a feeling of that, right? And just go onto the instrument, and we'll just start on E flat in the staff. Just tu, kind of slow, just so you really get the feel of that. If you're having trouble getting the K out, just try doing a bunch of Ks. Just so you sort of find it, right? And then as a sort of preliminary exercise for this, just take an E flat scale, and on every step of an E flat scale, play some double tonguing. So now the key to double tonguing is not actually the tu ku is important, but it's just as important that you put air through so that that K has something to bounce off of. So really make sure that your air is really going through. And you really get it. Then you can just simply do that exercise till you get it faster. After you get used to the tu and ku, you should be able to go fast pretty quickly. But just to kind of get used to that. So practice that before you start to do this, okay? You might try this on one note just to get you the rhythm and the tonguing together. You know, just so you don't have to worry about changing notes in the middle of things. And then it's just a matter of applying it. Other than that, that's really what this is all about. The rest of it is really not very complicated. So practice your double tongue separately. Get it so that it's just easy, that you can just toss it off and not have to worry about it at all, and then go through and work on this, okay? So characteristic study number 6 is a real technical exercise. It shows whether you can play the complete range of the instrument, whether you can play in tune, whether you can play with good articulation, all of those kinds of things. It may seem really, really hard for you at first because there's just a lot of notes. So my suggestion to you when you start working on this is to really simplify and break it down into ways that you can do it. One of the simplest ways that you can do it, obviously, is just play it very slowly. But I would also just suggest that you try to take it in smaller pieces. For example, when you practice this, it's 6 lines. Work on the first 3 lines one day, work on the last 3 lines the next day, so that you're getting through the entire thing on a regular basis, but you're not always getting stuck at the beginning or stuck somewhere in the middle and when you're playing it. And when you take that 3 lines, start by being very, very deliberate. What I like to do on this particular one is to practice half measures. Slowly at first. And I might actually do each of those little chunks 2 or 3 times. And just do it 2 or 3 times, and then go to the next measure. And notice I'm just doing the ascending part. And then I would go through and do all the ascending parts all the way through. And then the next thing I would do is I might go through and do the descending part. You know, so I just really hear that, you know. And then work my way all the way through the 3 lines just doing that. And notice I'm not doing it up to tempo, you know. If you're having trouble with the high notes, try buzzing them, you know, especially like the arpeggio to the A flat. You know, if you can vibrate it and buzz it, you probably can play it. Some other things to be thinking about here, especially when you're ascending up into the upper register, right? Try not to let things get tight in your throat or in your shoulders or in your body, okay? What I like to have my students do is like to have them think about relaxing their shoulders as they go up. You know, so you really feel like the airway is open. If you close off your throat, it makes it a lot tougher to get up there. The other thing to pay attention with this particular piece is there's a lot of different slur patterns. We have this one where we have slur the first 2 and tongue the next 4. You know, but as you go down the page there a little bit, Mr. Arban starts moving it around or grouping things a little differently. So, for example, on the 3rd line, we have 3 plus 3. And then next we have 2 tongue, 2 slurred, 2 tongued. You know, make sure that you're really locking all of those in. It gets a little tricky, especially the last couple of lines, you know. So I like to practice, again, on one note, just to work on my articulation. So this is the 2nd line from the end, from the 5th line. So I'm making sure that I'm just really clear about where I'm where I'm slurring and where I'm not. You know, for those of you that are maybe not familiar, it's basically going to be under that slur. You're going to treat it like a legato tongue. So the first note is ta, and anything after that under the slur is da. Ta da 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 ta 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 da 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 ta ta. So just make sure that you're speaking those well and that you're hearing those well. I also like to practice this slurred. You've heard me do this several times now in this session, and part of that is because I really want to make, what slurring does is make sure my air is really doing the work it needs to be doing. So I'll just take it from maybe the second line from the end of this. Just don't even tongue it. Just let your air and lips do the work. If you can gliss through the whole thing or slur through the whole thing, tonguing it is just adding something to it, okay? But what we want is we want that airstream, again, to do the work that we want it to do. We talked about not always starting at the beginning, you know, like break it up, do the first 2 lines one day, the second line the next day. Now, the next part of doing parts of this would be what I would call 1 beat or 2 beat repeat. So I might take the first measure. And then I do the next measure. You know, and just do each one on 3 times and just work your way through, you know, and this is a way to build tempo as well. So if you're trying to get it to go faster, Try to set your metronome at the tempo that you want or that you're trying to achieve, and just see if you can do one measure chunks at tempo. And then after you get feeling good about that, go back the next day maybe and do 2 measure parts of this and see if you can get 2 measures in tempo, and then kind of work your way that way. But this is all about breaking this down. All about breaking this down. So it means you have to look at a little bit every day, and it means you have to take the time to really, what we're talking about is practicing, not just running it through. Really resist the temptation to just run it through all the time. That should be what you're doing towards the end when you're getting near your audition time. Doing more run-throughs and more run-throughs so you feel like you can do it in one take. But in the early stages of it, spend more time practicing and breaking it down than doing anything else. I think you'll find that if you do this, you'll accomplish more, you'll learn it faster, and you'll actually feel like you have confidence to get through it. So this etude from Bordoni is obviously completely different than the Arban stuff, which was very technical. But this is all about musicality, all about playing with beautiful legato and playing musically. So you'll notice in this piece there's a few pianos stacked in a few places around, different places, but there are no other dynamics. And these are they're not in there because it's intended for you to figure out what to do. So generally, what we're going to do is as things ascend, I'm going to make a little crescendo, and I'm going to diminuendo a little bit as I get towards the end of the phrase, as it comes down. You could probably hear it in my performance, right? It was not exactly, there were some places I played a little bigger than piano because I wanted to make a little bit more musical statement. So just getting used to the idea of thinking about these sort of big 2 or 3 measure lines, and keeping them musical. The other thing to be thinking about too is this is a little bit about the way you would build a paragraph. So for example, the very first part of this, we have a short 2 measure piece of melody under a slur, and then you have another short piece, and then you have another sort of longer piece that's maybe 4 measures. Think about those as like words in a paragraph, sentences in a paragraph. So the first sentence might be, my dog has fleas. The second measure, second is a little higher, but it says the same thing rhythmically. So maybe my dog has fleas and they're purple and they run fast. And then the last one is a longer sort of elaborated version. You know, my dog has fleas and they're purple and they run fast and they really make me itch and I don't like them. You know, so it's almost like you're saying something this 3 times very similarly, but you have to sort of make a difference. So you might play the second phrase a little more than the first, and the third one a little more than the second. Or you could play the middle one as the most, and then play the last phrase as something that comes down. It's really up to you. The thing about it is you have to be convincing. You know, you have to just come up with a plan, play it a few times, see what you like, and make sure you're doing you're really committing to what you've decided so that we know what you mean. Okay, so there's lots of ways you could do this. Generally, it's as we go up, we're going to get a little louder, but and come down, you get a little softer. But there's lots of ways you could do this. So try it different ways. You know, try 2 or 3 different ways and find the one you like the most. Then mark it in so you remember and play it that way every time. The second thing about this is obviously it's a longer etude, right? It's a whole page. So make sure, again, like we talked about with some of the Arban's things, make sure that you break this up. So maybe you play the first half one day and then from measure 27 to the end the next day, and you're always kind of rotating through and making sure you're taking the time to do that. The second thing too is when you do those sections, do the kinds of things that make your legato really solid. So remember when we play legato, we're going to use that do tongue and we're going to keep our air going and going and going, almost like it's a long tone. So I might start by just practicing my legato tongue, phrase by phrase on one note. I guess I'll just do it on F since we're in the key of F. Notice I'm putting the dynamics in too, right, as well. So I'm getting used to just making my airspeed change to get the dynamics to come out, but also just working on my legato tongue so it's really solid. And then I would go back through and I would play it without any tongue at all. So some things are going to sound glissed and some things are going to be slurred. The thing about glissing is it's a great way to make sure your airstream is not dipping or changing. Your air has to be constant always when you play legato. So when you gliss, you sort of make sure that the air never stops. It never ever stops, ever. So, except where the phrase ends. Okay, so now, then it's just a matter of putting those two together. So I'm going to think about my air like it's glissing, and I'm going to tongue like I did when I just did the one note. Now, when you gliss it, if you find that there are natural slurs that you don't have to tongue that work pretty well, and you know where those are, from the C to the A and the C to the C at the beginning of these first 2 phrases, I just lip slur those. because it's better and smoother than if I could tongue it, right? So you can tongue all of it if you want to, if that's more comfortable for you. But if you're used to glistening it and you sort of figure out that there's places here where I don't have to tongue and I can make it simpler, then do that and get used to doing that. Now, a couple other things about this particular etude. We have triplets, and then we have dotted 8/16. So for example, at the end of, or the middle of the second line, we have a bunch of triplets, and then we have a dotted 8/16 at the end. And they're a little different, right? And this happens all through this etude. There's the dotted 8/16. So practice you could practice this by practicing subdivided. You can do it that way, or you could run your metronome on triplets. There's long changes of triplets, for example, with lots of ties in the middle of the third line there. Run your metronome in the triplet. Bop, beep, dee, dot, dee, dee, dot, dee, dee. Right, so that you're coming off the ties right when you're supposed to. I like to practice these subdivided a lot. And then I know exactly where I come off the tie, and rhythmically it's just easier. Playing good legato means you have to have excellent rhythm because you have to move quickly with your slide, right? And you have to be right on time. So if you're hesitant with your rhythm, or if your rhythm is not very clean, it's going to be a lot tougher to play this. Now, the last thing is some of the stuff at the end. So we have these arpeggios, you know. You know, whenever I have things that leap like that, and even the one at the end. You know, that to me is an excellent place to buzz. So just to kind of find the pitch when you're doing big leaps like that, so you get more comfortable. Now listen, if you're going to play this piece too, one of the ways you can practice besides one note, glistening, and together is to also buzz a section of it. You know, it gets you in your ear. This particular etude has lots of big leaps, like leaps of a sixth, or, you know, from C to A, or leaps of an octave from C to C, so that you're really accurately finding everything and hearing anything. It's a great idea. Try it, for example, what I call sort of play, buzz, play. So you might take a section, I don't know, I'll go from the middle here. Then I buzz it. You know, I think you'll find that your sound improves. I think you'll find that your legato gets a little easier. I think you'll find that you're able to make all these connections musically a little bit easier. And then I would do the next maybe phrase there and play it and then buzz it and then play it. You know, again, so I'm playing it and I'm buzzing it and then I'm playing it. So I get the results of my buzzing after I've buzzed them the third time. The first time is to get it in your ear, and then the buzzing should be accurate pitch, and then the last time is to see if you've improved what you've done. You can work through a whole half of the piece doing that, you know. So I hope you've enjoyed this. I would encourage you to get to practicing now and early on in the summer or in early fall so that you're ready for the auditions in December. It's going to be exciting to be live again when we do our auditions this year. And I look forward to seeing how everyone does. If you'd like more information about the University of Missouri School of Music or about the Trombone Studio, check out our website in the description below. You can also find us on our Trombone Studio Facebook page and view past performances of the University of Missouri School of Music on the YouTube channel, including the trombone choir and trombone recitals.